Welcome to Brandsplaining. I'm Allie Lefevre.
I'm Lindsay Rush.
And it's our very first episode.
Yay! Those yays could have sounded yayer.
They were not very enthusiastic as a start.
Well, we really are very, very excited. We have been working on this for like 9 months.
Oh, gosh, yeah, at least.
So we're giving birth to a podcast.
Feels like it. And it's been a very glamorous process of sitting in our hot, stifled closet recording. So everything you see in the movies.
Yeah. I mean, if it sounds too good to be true, starting and launching a podcast, it is. It's what people think it is. It's easy. It's intuitive. There's no work involved. You know, you're going to feel really cool the whole time. So good luck.
But it truly has been such a delight to talk to some of the raddest people from our favorite brands, take time out of our workday to get to have conversations with folks who are hilarious and so creative and clever and who have an immense pulse on what's going on with marketing and branding and who have been totally game for our shenanigans in this business casual podcast.
Yeah. I mean, the reason we started Brandsplaining was, you know, in hopes of having conversations that felt more casual, that felt like more of a chance for the people that we're interviewing to let loose and show their creative sides and share their insights in a way that didn't feel so buttoned up. And, you know, we have, I think, 7 under our belt at this moment, and we're going to be rolling those out to you guys. And I've just been so delighted at how people have risen to the occasion because ultimately we believe so strongly in humor as a effective tactic for marketing and branding. And it turns out we're not alone. And so it's so great to talk to other people who are utilizing this as a tool and experiencing success and sharing the ways that they have implemented it in hopes that we can bring more levity and positivity and fun into the world. We think that marketing and branding deserve better and that the world deserves better. And welcome to the Church of Brandsplaining.
Welcome to our cult. The doors are locked.
But yeah, we could talk about this forever. And turns out now we sort of get to with people who are very smart and bright and funny.
Yeah, and we get to play with them too, because we've tried to gamify this podcast a little bit. And so there's really nostalgic games. And I think that has drawn out just the wildest, wackiest, weirdest conversations in all the best ways. And I think that's a really fun piece of this is that normally when you're showing up to a business podcast, you're expecting just to, you know, hunker down and talk shop. And yeah, we do that too, right? It's meant to be very insightful and informative. But also, we want people to play and laugh and have a silly goose time. And so I think we've found the right balance.
We'll see. I hope that you will hear in today's first episode, which we're going to tell you about in a second, we have sort of developed this question format where we haze people off the bat a little bit. We tease them because that's one of our favorite forms of humor, self-deprecation. And everybody has been such good sports about it and laughing and going with it. And it is just like gets it off to a funny start right away. It's one of my favorite parts of Brandsplaining.
Everyone lets loose a little bit because like I won't say what it is, but once people get through that part of the interview, I think everything else is on the table. And yeah, people are super relaxed and it ends up really fun.
Right. Okay, so today's episode was an absolute hoot. We got to talk to our Instagram friend, Kejal MacDonald, about her time working for Tushy and Thinx, 2 iconic brands that we have admired for a long time and that have mastered the art of using humor to humanize taboo topics. It was like so interesting.
Yeah. And Kejal is literally a brand master. She has a master's degree in branding.
No biggie.
Accolade. And currently runs a marketing agency called Zuzu Digital. So it was honestly a treat to pick her brain about her time with these brands and just hear her wealth of knowledge and depth of insight on the power of comedy and how they took that comedic approach to eliminate isolation and shame and really bring a sense of truth and humanity to these notoriously, you know, controversial or uncomfortable topics. It was just beautiful to witness that transformation and see what they could cultivate from that. Also, I hate the fact that I just said pick her brain, but I'm going to practice a little self-forgiveness.
I mean, it honestly sounds like we paid Kejal to parrot back to us like obedience philosophies because she would say things And I would be like, what? And he'd be like, that's exactly what we think.
She sounds like a plant, so
Yeah.
she's not,
So
FYI.
that's why this is our first episode because it's someone who aligns exactly with what we think, and that's what we prefer to talk about.
We've molded her from clay, so.
It's just like me in a trench coat, like disguising my voice. I'm Kejal.
Using one of those voice machines that we,
Yeah.
remember back in the day when you would prank people and you would have those voice changers? Yeah.
It was tough trying to be myself and be this other person. So just a little bit of background of the two brands that we sort of like hunker down on that Kejal has spent time at. The first one is Tushy, and Tushy makes bidet attachments that have sort of introduced America to this way of wiping that most of Europe and Asia have been accustomed to for decades. And they really relied on humor and puns and lightheartedness to help them get that message, to butts all across the U.S. And they've been featured everywhere from Forbes, Vanity Fair, New York Times. Allie and I both have one. We've done a one-liner challenge to come up with taglines for Tushy. It's a great brand, and they've really, brought bathroom humor. I was going to say they've elevated it, but they've just embraced it.
I will have to say Tushy has been the best purchase I've made in 2020 so far.
Me too.
So, game changer.
Yeah.
So the other company we got into is Thinx. So they are a feminine hygiene company known for their revolutionary reusable period underwear. And then also they have a really bold, candid voice that has really spoken to this topic in a way that no one else has.
Mm-hmm.
And they also have a brand called Speaks, which is an incontinence underwear, and Between, which is specifically geared toward menstruating adolescents. And so their whole portfolio is just really stripping back shame and discomfort from a notoriously taboo topic.
Yeah. So Kejal really sort of, peeled back the curtain on a lot of branding decisions, a lot of brand personality choices, a lot of the customer feedback, how they decided, what voices were right for each brand, because she also worked on Speaks when they launched Speaks. So it's like Tushy, then Thinx, then Speaks. And she told us about the difference in their approach and their tone of voice and the way that resonated with people. I mean, I feel like I want to listen to this 7 times because she had so many good things to say about your point of view and hyperspecificity. And I don't know, it was so good.
It really was. Again, it felt like she was speaking our language. And it was honestly such a delight to talk to someone who is so entrenched in our industry and who has such a deep appreciation for fun and levity and humor, and really knows how powerful it can be when it's intentionally and thoughtfully deployed across various brands and in various mediums, and how it can be such a beautiful tool to elicit the right response and reaction from your consumer. And yeah, it was awesome to see how they took 2 radically different approaches with both the Tushy and the Thinx brand. And that just really resonated distinctly with each audience, and how they were able to shape the narrative of, again, very taboo, normally uncomfortable topics, and really create a welcoming, inviting environment for their consumer. And we just know that you will walk away from this conversation with such a deep appreciation for what it means to have a strong, distinct, distinguished brand personality, and how it can really help take a product or a service and make it an outlier and a household name in its respective industry.
Yeah. So without any further ado, here's our interview with Kejal. We know that you're going to enjoy it, and we can just say as a teaser, look forward to a story about Bubba Sparks. And I bet you did not think that was coming on Brandsplaining, but that's what we want you to know, is that you never know.
Come for the branding, stay for the washed up white rapper who spells his name with a triple X at the end.
But yeah, enjoy.
And now, for all the women in the business of being women in business. For girl bossy bosses and boss girly girls. For CEOs, mogals, and branding babes ready to make herstory. Please put your lady hands together and welcome to the stage, Brandsplaining.
I do not speak French, but one of my favorite things to do is a fake French accent, preferably like a French chef, if I can.
Oh, like not Maurice from Little Mermaid. What was the name of the
His
chef?
name's not Maurice. Maurice is Belle's dad.
Belle's
How dare
dad.
you?
Oh, yeah, les poissons, les poissons.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did he have a name?
I think he was just chef.
Just chef, just very aggressive chef.
Oh God, he's vicious. That's who you're channeling as your inspo.
Yes. I like, give me 3 weeks, I can grow a tiny pencil-thin mustache. Just wax it in.
Just stay on the line. It says his name is Chef Louis.
Oh, that sounds right. Chef Louis? I think someone calls for him when he's in the kitchen creating a ruckus. Like someone is like, Chef Louis.
You are really good at that.
I can't believe Prince Eric would employ him. He just doesn't seem like they would gel.
Yeah.
Prince Eric is a dreamboat. #1 cartoon crush. Oh.
It's not always going to be a click with your hired help.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
That's my biggest issue these days. All of my help, I'm always like, I just got to wait him out.
Listen, you make a mean creme brulee, but I don't really care for you.
Well, we're already recording.
Surprise.
Fabulous.
We're already deep into the interview, so it's been a delight so far.
This is it.
Are we done?
Kejal, thank you so much for being here. This is Brandsplaining.
This is wonderful.
You got splained.
Yeah. I got negged and splained.
Yeah, we're working on some cool catchphrases for the podcast. We're just going to be testing. Right now, it's like, you got splained, which feels aggressive, but it's testing poorly.
Rolling off my tongue.
The good news and bad news is it is testing material.
The bad news is we don't have anything else. That's all I got.
Tapped out.
Oh. So before we get into your branding career, which we're obviously super excited to hear more about, we always start the pod with this question to kick things off.
Let's do it.
What is the most memorable experience you've had with a white rapper in the early 2000s?
Well, I'm so glad you asked this question because I happen to have a very formative experience with a white rapper in that exact time frame.
Whoa.
We had no idea. We decided to just throw this out there hoping.
It's our favorite icebreaker.
Yeah.
It's a very relevant one. I think everyone has a good answer for this. I will tell you the short version of this story, which will, I think, reveal a lot about me, namely that I like to do things for the story. And a very important theme in my own personal favorite kind of humor, which is the callback. So I'll set the scene. It was spring break 2002, I believe.
Remember it well?
We were in Chef's Kiss. We were in
French Chef's Kiss.
French Chef's Kiss. We were in South Padre, Texas, and we were on spring break. And there was kind of the big like spring break club that we went to every night. We're all underage, just, debauchery, all the worst MTV things. But they had this big marquee outside, and it was like every night there was a big performer on the main stage. So the first night we go there, it's like the beginning of spring break. We see that Thursday night, Bubba Sparks was performing. I don't know if you remember Bubba Sparks of the acclaimed Miss New Booty.
Do we ever?
At the time, my kind of on again, off again college romance was like obsessed with Bubba Sparks. And we were off at the time.
Red flag.
Huge red flag. We were off at the time. And I turned to my group of friends and I said, Thursday night, we're coming and I'm going to make out with Bubba Sparks. I made this proclamation at the beginning of the week. So the week goes by. Thursday night, rolls along. Most of our friends were like so exhausted from being out during the day. They were like, we're staying home. And I was like, I'm going to the club and I'm going to meet Bubba. And I just kind of committed to this like as a running joke.
Yeah.
Not at all thinking this would actually happen. So I get to the club Thursday night. I watch Bubba perform. It was glorious. And then serendipitously, I get a text from a friend of mine who I was not there with, but happened to be there also on spring break. And she said, hey, we're up in the VIP lounge. And her friend she was there with, her aunt and uncle owned this club.
Oh.
So they'd spent all week up in the VIP lounge. And she just happened to text me on Bubba Sparks night. And I was like, meet me by the stairs. I'm coming up. So she comes around. She like waves at the guard. Like he lets me up. And we're hanging out up there in the VIP lounge. The show ends. I look across the room and who do I see but Mr. Sparks?
Bubba himself.
Bubba himself. So in my head, I'd had several like pineapple vodkas.
Yeah.
At this point, I was like, I could actually fulfill this joke. I could like see it to like fruition. So I had enough liquid courage to like just walk over. And the only thing I had to say to Bubba Sparks was he's from Georgia. It's a very big theme in his lyrics. My mom is also from Georgia. So that was my opener. I was like, oh, my family's from Carrollton.
My mom would like you.
Yeah. So we just like start chatting for a few minutes. And then like the conversation kind of starts to get stale. And I was like, this is it. So I just made my move. I leaned in. We made out for a couple minutes.
Oh,
I pulled back and he was like, he looked in my eyes and he said, I want to make love. And I was like, gotta go. I ran off. I ran all the way home. I bust into the hotel where we're staying and I was like, I did it. And no one, like, this was a running joke that no one actually thought was going to happen. And then the stars aligned and I made out with Bubba Sparks.
Wow.
I mean, if it was 2002, running home in platform flip-flops must have been very difficult.
It was not a short jaunt.
Glitter just peeling off her face and body.
Just pineapple sweat.
Yeah. Okay, I went to South Padre Island for spring break in 2004.
Okay.
And the rapper at that club that year was Trick Daddy.
Oh.
I did not make out with him, but I did write Trick going down this farm and Daddy going down this farm. I somehow had found a huge permanent marker and did it on anyone around me. So we were all going, Trick love the kids. Just a bunch of dumb white kids like, woo.
How long did that marker last?
I don't know. And then we were probably like laying out the next day like, we're so crazy. I feel like I wish I would have made, like, if we were saying this is an icebreaker about white rappers, we should have called it an icebreaker. And that's the podcast. Thank you so much.
Thank you. We're done again. Our second episode already done.
Oh, man. What a great story.
Thank you. But I know you guys are all about humor. And I think one of the funniest comedic devices is the callback. Like I'm all about the callback.
Same.
I don't care if it's been 5 minutes or 5 years. Call it back.
There's nothing that will elicit hysterical laughter from me than a really well-timed callback when you're like, wow, I can't even believe they remember that.
It's also because it takes you a second and you're like, it's like that really like gratifying, like tiny beat. And then you're like, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
So
man.
good. Wow. You've wowed me already. So I bow down to your greatness.
I'm in. Bubba Sparks. I had to look him up. I didn't remember what he looked like. I do remember his songs.
Well, yeah. He had Miss New Booty, and then there was another one that came out that was slower, and I used to like it, and I can't remember it right now. I'll have to look it up.
We'll have to include that in our episode description. Links to some of his great work.
I believe his first big hit was called Ugly. And I think he was singing about himself. I think it was like, I'm fucking ugly. Ugly. He was just like leaning into it. Yeah.
Oh, excellent. Okay, there is a second icebreaker that's actually legitimate and is not hazing. But it is difficult. It's sort of like a would you rather. And it is this. If you had to be called one of the following for the rest of your career, you have to choose girl boss, lady boss, entrepreneur, power babe, mo gal, or CEO. It's tough stuff.
This is the Sophie's Choice of obnoxious female-centric professional names. I'm going to go with Power Gal. Was that one?
Power babe or mo gal.
Oh,
but
okay.
I think you can make your power gal.
Power Gal. I'm just going to go with Power Gal because it's like the worst mashup of like, and maybe a bad superhero.
It's like someone got confused.
It's like an off-brand Power Ranger, like Power Gal.
Yeah. Or like the Powerpuff Girls. Like,
right.
It just elicits a lot of bad.
Yeah.
It was like Toys R Us versus KB Toy Store. It was like the KB Toy Store version of a superhero.
Sure.
Totally. There was no show. They were just like cheap, made in Taiwan toys with no backstory.
Yeah.
And kids were like, I wanted the other one. You're like, well, you got a Power Gal.
This is what you got, the Power Gal. Isn't she cool? She has no accessories.
She has no agency.
No power.
She has no identity.
73 cents to the dollar.
And she wants you to buy beauty counter.
You're welcome.
Oh, wow. All right. Well, let's get into your actual career, which is, I'm on the edge of my seat already. In the intro, we definitely hyped you up and told listeners a little bit more about your background, but you have two iconic brands under your belt, wink, Thinx and Tushy. And we would love for you to talk a little bit more about your roles at both of those companies.
Yeah, absolutely. So both companies were founded by the same woman. So that was kind of how I came in. And actually, I started working on Tushy before I even started at Thinx, but I had an offer and I was going to start, but she was like, "Can you just?" She was kind of working on Tushy on the side. So I jumped in. I started at the company and helping to lay the foundation for Tushy in 2015. So it was the summer of 2015. And yeah, with Tushy, it was kind of at the time, it was very much a side project. It was just, she had a lot of different hustle and ideas. And I was really excited because I love bidets and I love, anything to do with taboo subjects and just the branding challenge of tackling something that, most people find embarrassing and squeamish. And so with Tushy, what I did was the brand had already kind of technically soft launched, but I really had a hand in starting to shape what is the personality of the brand? What does the voice sound like? What is what's the communication strategy? And what do we focus on from a content standpoint? So it was really fun to jump in. And there are some brands that just kind of write themselves. And as you guys know, because you did an awesome Tushy brainstorm, it's so easy to think of ideas with a very specific product and subject. So I had a lot of fun with that. One of the big things we kind of got to was the voice of the brand. And we constructed this persona and this personality that the voice of Tushy was kind of like your gay best friend that knows everything before anyone else does. That's like a tastemaker and someone who's always kind of ahead of the curve and tells you what to do. So that was a lot of fun. And eventually I got so busy on the Think side that I kind of stepped away from Tushy, and very talented and capable people ran with it. But I love the brand. I champion it to this day. I have a Tushy, obviously. And then on the Think side, so I started summer of 2015. Thinx was already established and kind of gaining momentum. It was pre-MTA scandal. And I came in, I think I was in full-time employee number 8. So it was early years. Wow. It was really fun, wearing a lot of hats, a lot of just kind of getting things done. Not a lot of organization, but that's kind of the fun of early startup times. But one of the big things that I helped to do was to kind of strategize and launch the second brand under Thinx, which was Icon, which is now called Speaks by Thinx. A very similar idea for Thinx. It's absorbent underwear, but specifically for bladder leaks. So what excited me about Icon is, when Thinx launched, periods, everyone was still like, oh, periods, oh, gross. And I think, we played a big part in changing that narrative and changing the way women feel about their bodies. But I really was excited about the challenge of, your period is something natural that's supposed to happen that is part of a healthy functioning body. But bladder leaks are actually a dysfunction, a very, very common dysfunction. But it's something that women have a very different kind of shame and embarrassment about. And so I loved the challenge of stepping in and helping to eliminate some of that shame through humor. Create a sense of community and solidarity, because it's something that 1 in 3 women experience, but very few women talk about it. And so women who are experiencing it tend to think that they're the only one. So there's a lot of isolation and shame and all of the stuff that comes with, feeling embarrassed about something. So that was really fun. But yeah, I was with the company for about 3.5 years. So crazy trajectory of growth and changes and evolution and campaigns. And we just had a lot of fun and wrote a lot of funny marketing copy during that time.
It's so good.
I feel like something interesting about both of those, I guess all 3 of those brands, is Tushy there's bathroom humor, and then there are things that are not included in bathroom humor. I'm not trying to say that creating for a brand like Tushy, a brand personality for Tushy was easier in some ways, but I think it's toddler humor.
Totally.
Not Tushy, but about that topic. And then it's periods and bladder leak isn't typically under the umbrella of bathroom humor. Can you, if you said the Tushy voice was the gay BFF who knows everything, how would you describe the Thinx voice and then maybe the Icon Speaks voice in terms of a humor personality?
Totally. I think you're spot on. And there's also an equalizer about bathroom humor, right? Like every single person on earth knows that every single person on earth goes to the bathroom.
Mhm.
But like when you're breaking down periods, it's like, okay, well, all women between a certain age get a period. And then there's like with Icon, there's kind of this, only some like 1 in 3 women, but like it's not everyone. So
Right.
I think that kind of provides almost a hierarchy in terms of accessibility and relatability. Yeah. So if Tushy's kind of your gay best friend who like knows everything and wants to give you their opinions, Thinks was like the witty, intellectual, kind of avant-garde, irreverent millennial who had strong opinions and had a very strong point of view about the world and her body and what was happening in culture. And it was just this really hyper specific voice that I think has changed a lot over time, but that was kind of the origin.
Sure.
And then our inspiration for Icon was kind of this like slightly older, unapologetic, sassy ass woman who just says exactly what's on her mind. And through that kind of, you can think of a woman like that in your life, right? You're like, I want to
Right.
be you when I grow up. But I think through that like unapologetic voice, it helped eliminate a lot of shame and it helped take this thing that feels embarrassing for a lot of women and make it just kind of matter of fact. This happens to, millions of women and it's not a big deal and we're going to talk really frankly about it.
I love that. I think it's so interesting too. I know the name has since changed. Icons is now Speaks, you said.
Mhm.
But just the idea of that woman, that archetype being an icon for confidence within this often shameful, embarrassing like circumstance a lot of women find themselves in, I think is so interesting. I really love the voice of a really powerful, strong woman developing that message because then I think it lends itself, and feel free to correct me if you disagree or add more color. I think it lends itself to creating an environment for other women to feel more comfortable or confident, or like that topic is even something they can broach.
I agree 100%. And I think, what I've noticed just in the kind of common denominator of all of these brands is, they are taboo subjects. They're areas where you're breaking down kind of like cultural stigma and status quo and pushing the wall a little bit. And I think you have to have a voice that brings people along on that journey. And sorry for saying the word journey.
No.
You have to,
I'll edit it out.
yeah, please. But I think you're kind of the Pied Piper a little bit in that situation where you're like, come with me. We're doing this and we're going to go somewhere. This is a bad analogy. There are no rats. No one's dying. But I think you know what I mean. Like, I think you have to lead by example when you're trying to
Mhm.
shift the perception of products and categories and topics.
Yeah, it sort of reminds me of, and I think goes down a different trail a little bit about the ways that people want to speak to women, like the ways that women are marketed to, the ideas that there's like one type of woman who's over 50 or there's one type from 20 to 40. You talk a lot about psychographics and the importance of like really being specific with that. But to that end, I feel like any incontinence advertising from any of the big, Depends and whatever, like I think they
Yeah.
go almost like in the girl boss territory of like overly flowery, almost like too empowered instead of just like candor.
Totally.
To me, it reminds me of the stereotype of like wearing white pants and rock climbing and tampon commercials.
Mhm.
You're like, I don't have to like love it to embrace it and to not feel shame about it. And so I feel like humor allows like relatability in that way instead of just being like, girl, it's just a diaper. Like, it depends. Like, we're fine. Like, and you're like, we don't have to, which feels dismissive almost.
Yeah, I think the most important element for me as I was thinking about this, like preparing to talk to you guys, I think what humor brings to conversations is the truth. And I think like something's not funny if it's not true.
We say that all the time. We love that.
Yes. And I think that where so many of these like, Kimberly Clarks and, Poise and Depends and all of the kind of big names, where they go wrong is they don't spend any time kind of in the seat of the viewer or their customer and really understanding all of the different elements of, how women feel when this happens. And, they might be able to laugh about it with their girlfriends, but they might be really embarrassed if it happens at work. And there are all these nuances that I think are really important. And you have to understand who you're talking to in order to talk to them in the right way.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that's so true. And I do think like that's the beauty of, like you said, of utilizing humor, because I think it can get to someone's actualized experience as opposed to like a stereotype or a trope or a cartoon version of what you think people are experiencing in any given situation. or making it too universal that it almost becomes unrelatable to anyone. So that's what's so fun about like the nuance and specificity of jokes and really colorful copy and really punchy messaging is you get to get into that very relatable specific experience that people go, oh yeah, that's happened to me. And it's not so broad of a blanket.
Totally. And one thing that I did that I think was really important in the work that we were doing was I spent a lot of time talking to women who are experiencing bladder leaks and who feel like a bunch of different ways about it. So I used to spend every month, I would carve out one afternoon where I would just call our customers and like I would arrange it ahead of time, but like spend 30 minutes asking them questions and having them tell me stories. And, I realized at one point that I was kind of the only person receiving that. And so I started arranging, like after work get togethers where we'd have like 30 women come in and just share their stories and talk about it and how they feel about it. And it was really powerful having the team sit in on that because, some people on our team experienced bladder leaks and they had their own first person experience and some didn't. And so I think that was a really important tool to be able to help step in their shoes. And, I remember one time we had a group of women in and they were awesome and so funny and so vulnerable and like sharing their stories. And they were like exchanging numbers at the end. But our creative director at the time, who was a man, like was moved to tears. He was like sitting in the room and I saw him like wiping the corner of his eye as these women were sharing like, how it's impacted their sense of self and how it changes the way they exercise or the clothes they wear. And I think you have to have that. Like, that's why I say, like, really getting into the psychographics is so important and really knowing your audience. Like, anytime someone describes their target as, a very specific age range, unless it is a very specific life stage product, like, I don't know, something for maternity, I just have a hard time thinking that you're going to have any sort of qualified, like, valuable insight coming from that.
Yeah. You answered a question that we were going to ask, which was what was like a standout memory of that approach being really meaningful. And I feel like when we're working with clients, a lot of times they're very tied to their story of their brand and their story of their business, probably more than their brand. It happens with about pages a lot where they're like, we started this because this, and do you want to know our backstory? And if they can't tie that to how their audience feels or what they need or what they want or all of those things. And so sometimes we have to fight really hard to say, the inner workings of your business and your why, but like we have to make that matter to the audience. And so like those things are so helpful for business owners to be like, oh, their experience is different. Yeah.
Totally. I think that's so common. And if you think about your brand or your company as a relationship, like there are two parties in the relationship. There's you as a company or a brand writing your own about page, but there's another really important person in the relationship, and that's who you want to buy your product or service or, subscription. And so I think you have to think about both people. It's like, here's who I am, here's who you are, and here's why we should be together forever.
I love that. Together forever. And then get a French cook, and then
I've been waiting to get a French cook callback in here. It's gonna happen.
I wish I knew more French words.
I know, like oui oui and je m'appelle, and that's about it.
Do you know the French word le feu vert?
It sounds familiar.
Okay, so I feel like you've worked with a ton of different brands. You run your own agency now, in addition to Thinx and Tushy and Icon. We hear all the time from very serious industries or typically like unfunny industries that they are worried that humor or levity or any like those approaches aren't for them. Do you get that? And what do you say to brands with that line of thinking?
Totally. I think it's very common. I think, especially like you said, in industries that aren't typically kind of funny or jokey, there's a real hesitation to use humor. And oftentimes it's because they don't want to seem like they're not taking things seriously. And I think that's where it gets into the nuance of humor. Like my overall answer is everyone and anyone should be using some form of humor in their communications, like just to build likability and rapport and just connection with who you're talking to. I think that where a lot of brands get scared is they think that humor needs to be like slapstick or like over the top, silly, goofy. But actually, like one of my favorite forms of humor is just cleverness. And I think any industry can be clever. Like, if you run a funeral home, I would bet $10 I can find a way, or you two, you're the pros, you can find a way to use cleverness in a headline that is not disrespectful to your audience in this time of grieving.
Absolutely.
I think that should be your next like brainstorm. But I just think ultimately I think about brands. Brands are just like personalities, right? They're just like people. And saying that a brand shouldn't use humor or it's not right for someone to use humor, it's almost like imagine a person that like never said anything funny in their life. Like no one wants to sit next to you at a dinner party. No one is like calling you to feel better when they've had a bad day. I just think humor builds rapport, it builds likability, it builds, a shared experience. And I think it's such an important tool that more brands and industries should use. And I will add, if someone is working in an industry that doesn't typically use humor, that's like blue ocean. Like be the one
Even better.
even better. Like there's so much more opportunity to stand out because your competitors aren't like elbowing each other to get to the joke table.
Right.
It's funny you say all that because we fully agree. And you can make something lighthearted without making light of it. And
Totally.
Lindsay and I fully agree with you that we call our whole shtick brand personality. It's that we're essentially making your brand charismatic. Just like we want to be in the presence of people who make us feel good and draw out the best in who we are and that we connect with and we relate to and we like and they make us feel good. That goes for brands too. We want to utilize products and services that reflect who we believe ourselves to be, who draw out good elements of our personality or quirks in our character. And I really do believe humor is a catch-all that can elicit that response and elicit those emotions. So
Another catchphrase around these parts is that like I feel like that like the worst thing your brand can make a consumer feel is nothing at all. And I think people are so scared to do the wrong thing that then they do nothing.
Totally.
And then you have zero memorability or like relatability or engagement. And then also, comedy is such a good way to communicate information in a way that lodges in your brain. Like, think about the details we were able to pull about like old funny stories from our childhood or pop culture. And if like you need your clients or like your customers to remember information about you and tell their friends or take action, it just seems so obvious to me sometimes.
Totally. I just saw a billboard the other day that I actually almost sent you a message, and then I was like, I'll save it for the pod. I saw a billboard for Planet Fitness, and the billboard said, "Get your squats for diddly." And I was like, that is such an effective and funny message because you're not only using clever wordplay, but you communicated to me that you were inexpensive. And I'm remembering that. So it's like you get the right message in the right vehicle and you find the right phrase or idiom or alliteration or rhyme or whatever the kind of container is to make something really short and punchy and memorable. And that's just like the power of humor.
You get your squats for diddly. What a good turn of phrase. I really like that. Yeah, what a fun flip. Isn't it the best and the worst when you see a really clever piece of copy and you go, God, I would have killed to have written that.
Totally. But it's also like inspiring to remember like, oh yeah.
It really is.
I went to school for advertising and a lot of the more like creative focused kind of classes and workshops and stuff we did, I had one instructor who used to always make us start a campaign with the billboard. And he was like, if you can get like 7 words or less, communicate the simplest kernel of the idea. You can blow it out into a TV commercial later. You can do a print ad later, but like put it on a billboard first. And I think that's such a useful exercise that I use in my own like work life where sometimes if I'm going down a path where like an idea is a little too complex or convoluted, I'm like, billboard. Put it on a billboard. Like get to that billboard idea and then blow it out from there.
I think that's such a great piece of feedback and such a good tip. Kind of the first thing we always do whenever we're starting with a new client or a new brand is we develop something we call a hook. And essentially what we're trying to do is just distill who they are down to as few compelling, catchy, benefit-driven words as humanly possible.
I love it. I love a good hook.
As a starting point, just to go, okay, if we can keep coming back to here as our foundation, then we can write web copy. We can do more robust, fleshed out advertising campaigns. We can really flesh it out and do a tagline. But yeah, like when you get it down to that 7 words or less, it's super tricky to do micro copy and make it effective.
Well, and I love that exercise on a starting point because so many people, even like big brands that you know that like have been around for 100 years, they have a very hard time articulating what they do and who they are in a different and ownable way.
Mhm.
It usually ends up with this like paragraph long like jargon storm of like, and so I think that's such a smart way to like start at the purest form and then build out from there.
Yeah, it's surprising to see how many people know their business so well, but when it comes to talking about their business, they want to wedge every word, phrase, idea, thought they have ever had about it
Mhm.
into a paragraph. Nothing's succinct, nothing is catchy, there's no earworms. It's just, yeah, wild, wild west.
Totally. One of my beloved clients who I work with and love recently sent me a document of like kind of new value prop copy, and it was 3 pages long, and I I was like, "Okay, we're going to get on the phone and we're going to get this down to 3 sentences." Like this is too much. I love you. This is too much. But I think it's really hard when you're talking about yourself to not fall into the trap of like putting everything in the kitchen sink.
Okay, so Kajal, something we love that you had told us earlier is that your philosophy on branding and life in general is that you are subversive by nature. And we couldn't agree more with something we talk about on future episodes of this podcast, that being polarizing is a really, really good thing. It's something we try to instill in our clients. We obviously live by it ourselves, hence naming our business Obedient in the first place. Wink.
Yeah.
But this idea that the worst, like Lindsay just said, the worst thing a consumer can feel is nothing at all. Can you just expound on this idea of being subversive by nature and how it's applied to your work and maybe just, your life in this world?
Totally. I love this subject and I could talk about it for days. And I think it's important to note like being subversive doesn't mean being combative or being unlikable. Like, I think a very important definition of subversive, I don't know if this is the actual definition, this is kind of my definition, is just like going against the grain a little bit, like challenging the status quo, being a little contrarian in a good way, making good trouble. I don't know.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, I think that for me, it is very natural in my own personality. And so it has kind of trickled into the work that I like to do and the brands that I like to work with. I don't necessarily think that every single brand in the world needs to be subversive. Like, I'm fine with Oreos being for everyone and being whimsical and wonder-filled and like all of that. I would love if Oreos did something like totally out of the box and unexpected, and like that would make me the happiest person. But one of my favorite definitions of branding comes from Debbie Millman, who ran the branding program that I did in New York. She defines branding as intentional differentiation. And I think in order to be different and in order to be as far away from your competitors as possible, you have to be a bit subversive, right? And I think I've communicated with people who have been very hesitant to be subversive because they think that you can't be, they have aspirations of being like a global brand, and they think you can't be a global brand if you're like turning people off. But anytime you have a point of view, anytime you have a perspective, there's always going to be an opposite perspective. And you think about people, again, I often think of brands as people. Like, there are very few people in the world that everyone likes. Like, Tom Hanks and Oprah. That's it. Like, there's so many, like, there are people that I love.
Paul Rudd.
And Paul Rudd. Okay. But there are people that I love that other people don't. But if you don't have people that don't like you, you won't have anyone who loves you.
Yeah.
And, I think I gain a lot of inspiration by looking at large brands that are super subversive. Like, I love Patagonia, who, is number 24 on the Fortune 500. Like, they're one of the biggest companies out there. And they're extremely political. They have activism on their website. They have campaigns like "We're living on stolen land" and "Vote the assholes out." And like, because they have stayed so true to their higher power, authentic, sorry for the word authentic, like their true roots and their true north, it makes sense for them. So I think the thing about being subversive too is you can't really fabricate it.
Right.
You have to have a higher mission in order to be subversive about something. You have to believe in something in order to like share those beliefs in a polarizing way.
Yeah, I think that's so true. You have to know who you are and know who you're not in order for people to know you at all.
Right.
Totally. And what's important to you.
Yeah.
I also think a lot about another one of my favorite brands, which is Ben& Jerry's.
Oh,
and they've done the same thing where it's like, you would think that an ice cream brand that is owned by Unilever, which is one of the biggest, conglomerates in the world, wouldn't put out an ice cream flavor 3 ice cream flavors named after Bernie Sanders, but they have. And the fact that they're so unafraid to like hitch their wagon to a candidate that they believe in, that eschews the same values that they do. You know, they are celebrating someone who the majority of the American population did not vote for. And I think that when you see people that are so committed to their values and their truths, that's super appealing and you trust them. And I think trust is another really important aspect you have to have when you're connecting with anyone.
Well, that's a consistency piece, is that if you have a consistency of character, I think people really, they latch on. Because then, yeah, it's just like imagine having a friendship and a different version of that friend showed up every single time.
Totally.
You'd feel totally unnerved. You'd be anxious. You'd feel mistrustful of them. You'd be on edge. So I think that's the same thing with like, they have stayed true to their values and their beliefs and their North Star throughout their entire brand journey. And I'm sure it's evolved over time, obviously, but I think that's really powerful for consumers is to experience that.
Totally.
It reminds me of, we have like an element in our process or like a phase, I guess, called brand promise, where we help clients figure out basically what do they believe about how the world could be, how the world shouldn't be, like doesn't have to be, and how their offering is filling that hole. And to me, like you said, like there's no shortcut to that. And it reminds me of like brand mission statements that you can tell off the bat. Like they're like, we're not just making tires, we're making memories. And you're like, you're not like, you don't really believe it. Like you can't fake it.
Totally.
Yeah. I just think it's such an interesting thing.
And I think that's such an important, I love that you guys have that in your process. And it's such an important thing to articulate and to really get clear on because there are very foundational building blocks for a brand. And if you skip over that process, it's like building a house with no foundation. Like you'll have walls, you'll have a roof, but like you're not going to live in that house for 20 years and no one's going to buy it from you.
Right.
And I think that they're not necessarily the most sexy part of branding, but I think the fundamentals and the foundation are the most important because that's what like gives you a base to then, you know, propel into the atmosphere.
So true. It's funny that when you mentioned Ben and Jerry's, I just thought of this article I wrote, God, 7-8 years ago. I couldn't even tell you where it exists, but I wrote this whole analogy about branding being like vanilla ice cream and that everyone is fine with vanilla ice cream, but no one loves vanilla ice cream. Like no one's favorite is vanilla ice cream.
I think you're right because vanilla is synonymous with boring, right? And bland and the same.
Yeah. And everyone likes it and it's easy.
Yeah. It's not going to make any waves.
Yeah. Unless you're bougie and you want vanilla bean and you want it artisanal, small batch created by Chef Louis. Yeah. But yeah.
I think something one of you said earlier about this idea of wanting everybody to like you, but you should actually want people to love you. And in order for people to love you, some people have to dislike you.
Totally.
And I think getting over that fear is what like allows for more creativity, what allows for you to really become a distinct brand personality. That's just the wall that people have to get over. I love that idea of like not for everyone. There's just enough of a market, typically speaking, for you to really have a niche, really speak to a subset and succeed.
Totally agree.
And it feels like usually I would imagine people are failing because they're being too broad, not because they're being too narrow.
1,000%. And I think, you know, another really important rule of humor, as you guys know, is specificity, right? Like the more specific you can be, the funnier you can be. And I think it's the same for branding. Like the more specific you are about who you are and who you're for, like don't worry about making that your audience too small because people outside of your audience who aren't that will love you because you are so specific. Like I remember one of the big like surprising kind of lessons we learned at Thinx was very hyper focused on like urban millennial feminist women, you know, who like to free bleed and didn't think their body was embarrassing. That's like a very specific, like, I don't know the exact number, but like that's the type. And I remember as more and more people heard about Thinx, we would get feedback from like 50-year-old suburban women who'd be like, oh my God, I love Thinx. I read your emails. They're so funny. And I'm like, those are not written for you. And like, yet they're universally appealing. And I think that's kind of where it comes back to, again, like demographics are deceiving and you often have a lot of subsets of your audience that would be very surprising.
I like that. Okay, Kejal, I didn't know we had this in common. All three of us have a nerdy background in improv.
Yes.
So, and you had told us that you feel like you use it every day in work and in parenting. And we feel like a lot of the things we learned in improv help us in our brainstorms and in being able to sort of like look bad ideas in the eye and embrace them, because a lot of creativity can come from there. Can you talk a bit about like how those principles have guided you in creativity and work and life?
Totally. I think improv is such an important foundational tool for any type of creativity. Like anytime you're coming up with ideas and trying to think of something that, in this day and age, every idea has been created and it's published online. So like if you want to come up with something that feels fresh, you have to combine really interesting things together. And I think that's where like improv can be a really helpful tool in brainstorming. Obviously I yes and all the time, but one of my favorite kind of improv tools that I use a lot when I'm coming up with ideas is the concept of A to C. I don't know if you guys, at UCB, they talk a lot about A to C, which is like you have an idea. And instead of saying, oh, this is my idea, that's A, you actually go, okay, well, this reminds me of this, which takes you to B. And then that reminds me of this. And so you're kind of 2 steps removed from the initial idea. And I think where a lot of people fall into like kind of the been there, done that trap with creative ideas is they think of A and then they stick with it. And like a lot of other people have thought of A, but with your unique like perspective and association, like if you go to C and you go to C and you like, if we all come up with the same idea and go to C, we're going to have 3 totally different ideas. And I think that's just a great way to like multiply and get away from, your first idea is probably usually not the best idea, but it might be a great jumping off point.
I think that's why people have a lot of disdain for puns, which I like to defend them.
I love
think
puns.
A strong pun is excellent. The problem, I think when people say they don't like puns, it's the lazy ones. And to me, those would be your A ideas.
Totally.
If the first thing that comes to your brain is that, it's like the bitches and beaches. But like beaches be crazy. And you're like, well, if you thought of it that quickly, chances are the masses did as well. And like, unless you were the very first to do it and capitalize on it within like a day in some way, commodifying it, you have to let it go.
Yes.
And it's hard, especially, I mean, this happens to us all the time. We're like, are we the first to say that? Google. No, we're not. Gotta keep, know, like it can be original to you, but not original
to the masses.
Right.
Yeah.
I think I agree completely. I love puns. I once had someone on my team who said that puns were the lowest form of humor, and I made it my personal mission in life to prove him wrong and change his mind. I don't think I succeeded, but he was the DJ at my wedding, so I think at least I like won him over in some way, shape, or form. Good enough. It did. But I think you're totally right. Like puns are such a fun way to play with words, but the A puns are like the bad dad puns, and which I also love, but like they're not original. And I think if you have to take it a couple steps further to have something that feels at least a little less familiar.
And while you two were discussing puns, I just had Beaches Be Crazy trademarked. So
get it. My favorite is Girls Gone Mild.
Oh yeah. This was like in 2009. I thought I came up with glitter done, like get her done, but with glitter. I was like M into nail art. So I was like, ha ha. Nope. It's definitely
yeah.
I feel like on the topic of puns, the Tushy brand personality now, I feel like the reason they're able to succeed with a lot of expected puns is because they've gone so hard in the paint.
Yeah.
Totally.
They are just like, this is our brand. It's eye-rolly. It's groany. And so there are a lot of puns you've heard before, but because they're
packed in,
this is what we do, then it still becomes distinct. So I think that's another like valuable branding lesson is like, you don't have to give up if that feels right. You just have to commit.
Totally. And I think, Allie, you said it earlier, like consistency and commitment. Like those are also 2 really important tenets of humor, right? Like if you start, if we're talking about stand-up, like if you start telling a joke and it starts to bomb, you got to double down and you got to keep on going and like find a way to save it.
Yeah.
But I think that Tushy has gotten really clear over the years and like stayed very committed to like, and it was from the very beginning. Like it started with poop puns. It started with like fitting every single, like packing as many into one paragraph as possible. And that becomes like an ownable device. I think that, anything can be ownable for a brand if you do it with consistency and if it makes sense for your brand in some cases.
Sure.
But yeah, it's a hook. It's something that you build equity in over time, and then people know to expect it from you.
Yep.
Okay, gonna do a little left turn. And this is going to be our last question before we get into our ending game that we always play with folks. This is not a trick like the first question we asked you. It's a real game.
But, I'm getting trapped again.
Yeah. We always play this. Tell us which one of us you like better.
Yeah. We always play this. What are the last 4 digits of your social?
What would you change about my face if you could? It's just a game.
Just for fun.
So you told us the story, and I don't want to steal the story from you, about what your childhood bedroom looked like in terms of what you wallpapered the walls in. I love that story, and I would love for you to share with the listeners that story. But looking back on your childhood, can you see any elements of your upbringing or your kid personality that really led you into this work?
100%. I think Steve Jobs said the dots always connect in hindsight. You can always like look back and everything makes sense. And given the work that I do now and my obsession with like branding and creativity and advertising, it's very easy to see where those like roots started sprouting. When I was a kid, I used to collect print ads, which is like maybe not a very common thing for kids to collect, but I collected Got Milk ads and Absolute Vodka ads. And what I loved about them was like still some of the tenets of what I love about branding today and like good campaign ideas that have legs. Like I think Absolute's ad campaign ran for like 40 years. They used the same consistent print ad, and that was the only advertising they did for 4 decades. But, I loved how it was a simple creative idea, either milk on someone's upper lip or the bottles making some shape of art with like a theme. So, so good and so pure. Like both of those ideas are just so pure and attention getting. And so I literally like wallpapered my bedroom wall with milk ads and vodka ads. And there was actually a third type of ad that I collected that I did not originally tell you guys about, which was the library in my school had all of these like vintage National Geographics from the like 40s and 50s and 60s. And in the winter months, on the back cover, they used to run like vintage Coca-Cola ads. And it was like the vintage Coke Santa ads. And so I used to sneak into my school library and rip the back covers off. No one read those old Nat Geos anyway. But that was the third type of ad that I collected. But I did not put them on my wall because I didn't want my parents to ask me where I got them. So I kept them under my dresser. And I just loved them.
Like your porn. You're advertising porn.
Yeah, my porn. My vintage Santa Coca-Cola porn. And actually, this story has a very funny twist, which is when I was...
I am Santa.
I am Santa, yeah. No, when I was in high school, my uncle got very into like our family, tree. And he like put together this packet of like all of our family. And it turns out my great, great, great uncle was Asa Candler, who started Coca-Cola.
No way.
And it was like on the wrong side of the family. Like I have no Coca-Cola heiress money, but
bummer.
I do like to think that maybe like branding is a little bit in my blood.
Yeah. Wow. That's incredible.
That is awesome.
I do love the idea of you stashing these. Yeah. Like they were porno mags or like it was like money you had stolen from your sibling.
Yeah. Like candy wrappers. Like.
Oh, wow.
My shameful vandalized ads.
Now, I have to just ask, was that the only thing that was wallpapering your room, or did you have any heartthrobs ripped out of Teen Beat or Tiger Beat, Big Bopper?
So I didn't do the Teeny Bopper mags. I did have a couple of posters. Like I had a Brad Pitt Legends of the Fall poster.
Oh, wow. Peak Brad Pitt.
I was very into like Keanu Reeves and Ethan Embry. So I did have a few heartthrobs.
Oh, wow. Ethan Embry. I haven't heard that name in so long.
So
wow.
He is on the show Grace and Frankie. I don't know if you guys watch. And unfortunately, hasn't really held up quite so well.
Not in a heartthrobby way.
Not in a Can't Hardly Wait.
In a very loving, yeah. Oh, my sister and I just rewatched Can't Hardly Wait. And when I say it holds up, it holds up.
It holds up. It's a great, like, if you categorize the best last day of school movies, there's Dazed and Confused, there's Can't Hardly Wait. Like, they're up there at the top.
Really, truly.
Absolutely.
Yeah. The last movie I remember him in is Sweet Home Alabama. Wasn't he in that?
Yeah, he was.
Yeah, he was.
Yeah. Wow. He also had a few, like, he was a weird kind of favorite actor because he wasn't in a lot of stuff, but he was also like, he was in White Squall, but he was the one who died. Like, I don't even know if his character had a name.
Spoiler alert for anyone who hasn't seen.
If you haven't seen White Squall, I apologize.
Oh, great. Thanks a lot. Good job.
That's the type of thing that someone would leave a podcast review about. They'd be like, love this podcast. It's like really helpful. However, it spoiled White Squall for me.
I was halfway through White Squall,
3 stars.
and I decided to listen to this podcast episode.
Listen, I'd been meaning to finish White Squall for 27 years, but I haven't gotten around to it. And you know what? Now I never will.
Thanks a lot, Brandsplaining.
You got splayed. I think it holds up.
I think so too.
Oh, wow. So good.
Okay, so now it's time for our ending game.
Okay, I'm ready.
That is a real game, and it is called Guess Who Brand Mascot Edition.
Ooh.
We are going to give you clues about a sort of infamous brand mascot, and you have to guess. And if you don't get it from our clue, you can ask up to 3 yes or no questions, sort of like a game Guess Who.
Okay.
We're going to do 2 different ones for you.
All right. This is the first mascot we're going to have you guess. This villainous mascot is offensive, obnoxious, stubborn, and filthy. He's small, wears a tank top and suspenders, and has an aggressive persona whose entire shtick is preventing you from feeling better.
Mucinex.
Yes, but what's his name?
Oh, the Mucinex blob. He has a name?
There it does.
Flemmy.
It's close.
Mr. Mucus.
Mr. Mucus. I like Flemmy better. We got to rebrand.
We really do.
Mr. Mucus. Oh, but I will say the fact that he is voiced by Jason Mantzoukas makes me kind of like not dread getting sick.
Is that newish or was he always?
I think it's
love
newish.
Jason Mantzoukas. It's
It's
gotta be
yeah.
newish, yeah.
Because I heard when we were searching this that he's had a bit of a rebrand. Now he's more like trying to hang and people don't want him to hang.
Okay.
So now he's more annoying because before, remember, he like
he like wouldn't leave. Yeah.
wouldn't leave.
Yeah.
Like a squatter.
Yeah. Which Allie and I were talking about this and we're like, that should be an exercise for clients to be like, could you come up with a mascot? What would they do and how would that communicate your brand value? Because as we've been playing this game, you're like, that's genius. He's this guy and he's like, I'm not leaving and no one can get him to leave until they take Mucinex. And he's like, goodbye.
Yeah. Totally. I also think that the brand mascot is a little bit of a dying art. Like there aren't that many mascots anymore.
No, truly.
And I really like them.
It's a shame.
Yeah.
And do you guys know he has well, I know this because it's in our document, but Kejal, do you know that he has a new friend called the nasal sweller who resembles a bouncer, but he is also defeated by Mucinex.
Oh, I
So-
do not.
a
I haven't
bouncer.
seen this.
Mhm.
Sort of like the guy that got you to meet Bubba Sparks, the nasal sweller.
That beautiful man.
Destiny.
That's what we called him, nasal sweller.
Destiny.
Ugh.
I call him Destiny.
Yeah. People know him as a few
Yeah.
names. To me, he's Destiny.
Also, I just love this game.
Okay.
Thank you. Good.
Okay, this one. Okay, you grew up in the Midwest. I think you'll get it, but you can ask questions. Okay. So this is an elderly man who wears a tuxedo and thick framed glasses. He's known to suddenly perform high energy dance routines to an instrumental version of We Like to Party by the Venga Boys to invite stressed and overworked people to a place that he's the mascot for.
Oh, interesting. I went through like a whole guessing like Rolodex as you were going. Like at first I was like Colonel Sanders and I was like Mr. Peanut.
Yeah.
But can you read that last part again? The like where he's inviting them
Yes. So he does these crazy dances to We Like to Party to invite stressed and overworked people to the place that he is the mascot for. So he's like, come relax.
to?
Come have fun.
Man. Okay, I have some follow-up questions because I don't immediately know this one. Okay.
Yep.
Is the location he is inviting them to adults only?
No.
Okay.
And typically he gets off a bus is the way I remember him from these commercials.
Mm.
He hops off and he's always scared me.
I have a really random fact I can give you. It's not really
Okay.
a fact, but
Yes, please. I'm phoning a friend.
I don't know if you watch The Office,
Yes.
but this mascot is referenced in The Office and Pam Beesly hates him.
Oh, okay. That's going to give it to me.
It's very obscure.
I don't think I would have gotten this one.
Okay, Pam Beesly, I know she hates, there's like a list of things she hates because Jim always told Andy to like
Yep.
play the songs and do the things.
It's that episode. Okay. The mascot was alive and well between the years 2004 and 2010.
Okay, so it's a retired mascot.
Yes.
I didn't live in the Midwest in those years, so I
Mm.
may have missed.
I think this place, I've only ever known this place to be in the Midwest.
I don't think it exists outside of the Midwest.
Okay, it's not a Chuck E. Cheese.
Mm-mm.
It's not. Shit.
Should we give that last clue?
Yeah, one more clue.
So the place is an amusement park.
Oh, Six Flags.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yay.
Yes. Okay. I don't know the name.
I wouldn't have known his name either.
Me either.
Okay.
Do you want to take a guess?
Mr. Flag.
Close. So what's the next logical guess after that?
Mr. Flaggington.
No.
Mr. Six.
Mr. Six.
I just said Mr. Six. Okay. Mr. Six, that kind of makes him seem like a character in Reservoir Dogs.
Yeah. It really does. It does. It sounds like a superhero.
Thank you for holding my hand through that one.
Well, we wanted to give you a really hard one.
Yeah. Well, thank you. You guys succeeded. I do have to tell you a tiny, very quick anecdote.
Mhm.
My daughter is 5 and we've just started playing Would You Rather, and it's like her favorite game. But she's still learning like how to construct the questions. So yesterday she asked me, she goes, "Mama, would you rather swallow a bee that stings your throat or eat ice cream?" And I was like, this is not a very... I was like, okay. Usually you want there to be like 2 really good things or 2 really bad things, but she's just like 1 good, 1 bad. I'm like, I think I'm going to go with the ice cream. Vanilla bean.
If it's vanilla, I'd rather have bees sting my throat for me. Oh, that's so cute.
You could have the bee sting your throat and then top it off with some vanilla as a soothing.
It would probably get the job done.
Yeah, so the answer could be both. Oh my God.
Oh man, Kejal, you are hysterical and so smart and shared so many cool things with us. Thanks for getting splained.
Oh, you guys are the best. Thank you for having me. Such an honor, so flattering. I think you two are so funny and I love Obedient and I will forever be your number 1 fan.
Oh, wait, before we get off, give our listeners, where would you like them to like follow you or go check out what you're currently doing, like social handles or a website?
Oh yeah, totally. So I in my post startup life, ooh, that pee popped. In my post startup life, I am running a marketing agency called Zuzu Digital. We are a family centric marketing agency, and my co-founder and I are both working parents, and actually 90% of our company is working parents. So we have a lot of fun and
cool.
make a lot of like mom and dad jokes. But you can find us on Instagram at Zuzu Digital. I'm on Instagram at Kejal MacDonald, and you'll get a lot of like unsolicited branding advice and pictures of my kids.
Perfect.
Okay, you're the best. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you guys. This was so fun.
To stay up to date with the Bad Girls of Branding, a nickname we gave ourselves, subscribe to the podcast everywhere you listen. And if you like what you're hearing, leave a 5-star review.
And follow us at Brandsplaining on Instagram and Facebook, and at Brandsplain on Twitter, or go to brandsplainingpod.com.
Brandsplaining is brought to you by the Obedient Podcast Network, with production support by Martini Hill, cover art illustration by Halela, and special projects by Orly Spire.
Other podcasts developed by the Obedient Podcast Network include Forward, bringing you the weirdest emails and mass messages from everyone's craziest relatives, and Fangasm, where we read erotic fan fiction about your favorite TV, movie, and book characters. Think Harry Potter, Game of Thrones, The Office, and Star Wars, to name a few.